Tonight I want to talk about a man who has convinced himself he is the cure for a disease the country beyond Westminster has not even diagnosed. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, has spent the better part of the last year quietly manoeuvring himself into position as the figure Labour will eventually turn to once Keir Starmer's government finishes dismantling itself. He has done the rounds on television. He has offered the carefully worded, strategically deniable commentary about leadership, direction, and where the party has lost its way. He has made sure it is understood through every available route, short of actually stating it, that he is prepared, he is patient, and he is waiting. There is one significant flaw in this calculation, and that flaw is Andy Burnham himself. If you want someone to walk through his actual record without the soft, focused treatment he routinely receives from a media that has quietly appointed him Labour's rescuer in waiting, subscribe now, because what comes next is the version of his history Andy Burnham would very much prefer stayed buried. Start with what Burnham actually is, because the answer is considerably less impressive than the commentary surrounding him tends to suggest. Andy Burnham has been a fixture of British public life for more than 20 years. He served in cabinet under Gordon Brown. He entered the Labour leadership race twice and lost twice. He has held the mayoralty of Greater Manchester since 2017. A platform he has deployed with undeniable skill to construct a public image as the straight-talking, grounded northern counterweight to everything people despise about Westminster. That is the brand. The man who delivers while the politicians in London perform. The brand does not hold up when you measure it against what has actually happened. Manchester under Burnham carries its own catalogue of disappointments that somehow never find their way into the long admiring profiles written about him. Housing targets have been missed year after year, while he speaks about the housing crisis as though he is a concerned commentator, rather than the man who has had the authority and the mandate to tackle it in his own city. The transport network, the much-heralded B network, has absorbed colossal amounts of public money while continuing to produce disruption, unreliability, and a fare structure that has not meaningfully improved the affordability picture for the ordinary commuters who depend on it across Greater Manchester. Knife crime and serious violence have remained stubbornly embedded throughout his time in office, with Manchester repeatedly surfacing near the top of national crime figures in categories that should trouble any mayor who is genuinely claiming competence on public safety. None of that is entirely unique to Burnham, in the sense that every major city mayor grapples with the same deep structural pressures. What is unique is the size of the gap between what his record actually shows and the reputation he has managed to build on top of it. Burnham has been extraordinarily effective at being perceived as a man who gets things done, while the measurable outcomes in the city he runs tell a far more complicated story. Now consider why he believes this particular moment belongs to him. Starmer's government is, by any honest reckoning, in freefall. The polling numbers are catastrophic. The scandals have arrived at a pace that no government in recent memory has managed to match. The Freebies affair, the Reeves resignation, the Mandelson disaster, the grooming gang's failures with roots running directly back through Starmer's own time as Director of Public Prosecutions, all of it has compounded into a Prime Minister whose net favourability now occupies territory most recently inhabited by Liz Truss on her way out of Downing Street. Into that vacuum, Andy Burnham steps forward. He is not presenting himself as a continuation of the Starmer project, but as its correction. He talks about Labour needing to reconnect with its working-class foundations. He talks about the danger of a party that has stopped listening to the people it was created to represent. He speaks in the carefully constructed, always deniable language of a man who is running a leadership campaign while maintaining plausible cover that he is doing nothing of the sort, about the need for the party to find a new direction. Here is the question that no one inside the Labour Party appears willing to ask clearly. What would Andy Burnham actually do differently? Because when you sit down and examine his positions with any rigour, what you encounter is not a genuine alternative to Starmerism. What you encounter is Starmerism delivered in a regional accent with a looser collar. Burnham has not broken with his party's posture on immigration in any way that matters. He has not put forward a serious account of how he would have approached the small boats crisis differently. He has not laid out a credible route to actually cutting the asylum hotel bill that is draining hundreds of millions of pounds from the public finances every single year. He has taken aim at the optics of how Starmer's government has communicated its failures, while offering no evidence whatsoever that his own approach would produce different results on the ground. This is the pattern that runs through Burnham's entire career. He is exceptionally talented at projecting dissatisfaction with the way things are, while remaining almost perfectly vague about what he would actually put in its place. He criticised austerity under the Conservatives without ever specifying precisely which programmes he would have protected and exactly how the money would have been found. He criticises Starmer's management of the cost of living crisis without identifying which of the genuinely painful fiscal choices he would have made differently. The pattern is consistent because the underlying strategy has never changed. Plant yourself as the sensible alternative, signal all the right things, but never get specific enough to invite the kind of scrutiny that comes with having a real detailed costed plan. As a media strategy, it functions beautifully. As a foundation for governing a country that is in serious trouble, it is worth precisely nothing. Let me address something specific, because it matters, and because Burnham's defenders will argue I am being unfair to him. Burnham has spoken about Labour needing to take the public's concerns about immigration more seriously. On the surface, this sounds like precisely the honest engagement with popular anxiety that Starmer's government has so completely and consistently failed to provide. But listen carefully to what Burnham actually says the moment anyone presses him for specifics. The language begins to soften. The commitments start to dissolve. He talks about understanding what people feel, while producing nothing that resembles an actual policy that would reduce the number of people crossing the channel illegally or cut the cost of accommodating them once they arrive. That is not leadership. That is the performance of leadership, assembled for an audience that has long since stopped processing the actual content of what politicians say and now responds only to tone. Burnham has mastered tone. He has never once demonstrated that he possesses anything beyond it. There is a deeper problem here, and it cuts directly to the core of why Burnham would not actually solve any of the problems that are currently tearing Starmer's government apart. The crisis facing Labour right now is not at its heart a crisis of personality. It is not that Starmer is unusually stiff or unusually uncharismatic, and that installing someone warmer and more relatable would put everything right. The crisis is one of substance. The British public has watched a government promise integrity and produce scandal, promise control of the borders and produce continued disorder, promise to protect the vulnerable and then strip the winter fuel payment from pensioners, while spending millions every day on hotel accommodation for people who arrived illegally last week. Burnham offers no meaningful departure from any of that. He offers the same essential political instincts, the same fundamental priorities, dressed in a more approachable and more engaging exterior. Replacing Starmer with Burnham would be exchanging one face of an exhausted and discredited project for another. The substance, the open borders disposition, the dismissal of legitimate public concern, the preference for managed messaging over actual delivery, would be left entirely intact. This is why I say Burnham has no real answers, even before he has formally offered himself for anything. He has spent years carefully assembling a reputation as the reasonable alternative, without ever allowing that reputation to be subjected to the kind of serious examination that would expose how thin the substance beneath it actually is. The moment he is required to say precisely, specifically in detail what he would do about the boats, about the hotels, about the borders, about the pensioners losing their heating allowances, the distance between his cultivated image and his real political positions will become impossible to conceal. Labour MPs who are quietly consoling themselves that Burnham represents their way out should ask themselves one honest question. If the central problem is that the British public has lost faith in a political class that presents one version of itself and then governs as something entirely different, does swapping one career politician from that tradition for another career politician from that same tradition actually solve anything at all? Or does it merely postpone the reckoning that Starmer's government has already made unavoidable? The answer, I think, is not difficult. Burnham is not Labour's solution to its crisis. He is its continuation, wearing the vocabulary of change while offering none of its reality. The British public is not naive. They have seen this act performed before. They watched Starmer present himself as the clean break from Conservative sleaze and then accumulate gifts, perks, and scandals at a rate that would have shamed the government he replaced. They will not be deceived a second time by the same routine with a different regional accent attached. Andy Burnham wants to lead the Labour Party. He may ultimately be given that opportunity, but the moment he is required to move past warm, sympathetic gestures toward public anxiety and commit to something specific, costed, and deliverable, his campaign will collide with the exact same wall that has wrecked Starmer's premiership. Because the problem was never primarily about who delivers the message, it is about a political class, regardless of which individual happens to be standing at the front of it, that has lost the fundamental ability to govern in the genuine interests of the people who put them there. Burnham has no answers because the question itself, how do you restore a government that has comprehensively forfeited the trust of the people it is meant to serve, cannot be resolved by rotating the faces at the top while leaving every single thing beneath them exactly as it was. Britain does not need a more personable version of the same failure. It needs something that is genuinely and substantially different, and nothing in Andy Burnham's record, his stated positions, or his political instincts provides any reason at all to believe he is capable of delivering that. Subscribe. Share this. The next chapter of Labour's unravelling deserves to be understood with clarity before the country allows the same fundamental mistakes to be made one more time under a different name. Thank you, and I will see you next time.